Hi Year 12 and 13 chemistry students. This video is about balancing redox equations. There are three primary steps to balancing redox equations. The first is to identify what are the reactants, what's being oxidized and what's being reduced. The second is within that is to then work out what are they going to make. Second step is to then balance your half equations. And the last step is to combine those half equations to make an overall equation. Okay, so the first part of this, identify your reactant in your product. You first want to ignore any spectators if they're present. The second is you want to go and reference your resources. So if that's level 2, that's the ion chart you're given with the colors. If it's level 3, you're looking at E0 couples and making sure that you're using what's in the brackets and not stuff you've just made up. The third step is to check your observations to make sure they line up with what you're saying in your equations. And lastly, there's going to be some chemistry knowledge that will help. Usually, if you do the first 3 steps, you won't need the last step, but it's always good to have a little bit of extra knowledge just to make it easier. Okay, so we're just going to have a look at this example. K2Cr2O7 solution, that's potassium dichromate, mixed with sodium sulfite, Na2SO3 solution. The solution turns from orange to green. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is ignore these spectators. So I'm going to ignore potassium and sodium. In my equations, all I'm going to have is Cr2O7 2 minus and SO3 2 minus. Okay, so the second thing I'm going to do with this example is I'm going to use any resources I'm given. So I know if I look up the table, there are only 2 forms of chromium, Cr2O7 2 minus and Cr3 plus. If I looked at the level 3, there would be a couple with Cr2O7 2 minus and Cr3 plus combined. So either way, level 2 or level 3, you can work out it's going to make Cr3 plus because that's the only other form we're dealing with. And you could use some chemistry knowledge and know that yourself. Okay, the one with sulfite, well, there's a lot of options it could be. If it's level 3, it's a bit more narrow for you. It's a bit more obvious. Okay, but we can work that out in a second. The other thing we can do is use our observations. It goes from orange to green. Now, orange, you're going to have to know a little bit of chemistry knowledge. You're going to have to know that dichromate is orange to green. Okay, that's something you just have to know whether it's level 2 or level 3. Okay, so it's really useful to know that because it tells you about sulfite. Sulfite is not mentioned. There's no color change for it. So you must be thinking that sulfite is colorless and what it makes is also colorless and in solution. It's not a gas. So this removes the possibility of H2S or SO2 or anything else that you could be making. It has to make another colorless thing in solution. And there's really only one common form of sulfur that's colorless in solution. That's not H2S. Well, it's not SO3 2 minus, it's SO4 2 minus. That's your other common sulfur form. And there's a little joke. All forms of sulfur eventually make sulfate. It's like it's sulfur's fate. Moving on. So, to balance these equations, let's go into the next step. Once you've got that right. Okay, half equations. We're going to work through a bunch of examples. There are 4 main steps to this. You're going to balance everything in the equation that's not hydrogen or oxygen. You're going to balance oxygen with water. And then you're going to balance hydrogen with H+. And lastly, you're going to do electrons to balance the charge. So let's go into this one. All right, so dichromate to chromium 3+. What we want to do is balance everything that's not oxygen or hydrogen, and that would be chromium. So what I'm going to do is put a 2 here to balance the 2 that I had over here. Okay, so from there I want to balance the oxygens. So 7 H2O to balance the 7 oxygens over here. All right, so moving on, we want to balance the hydrogens. There are 7 hydrogens times 2, so 14. All right, so I want 14H plus on the other side. Lastly, I want to balance the charge. How I get to the charge, I'm going to add up everything on each side of my equation. Ooh. So on the left-hand side, I have 2 minus plus 14 plus. 14 minus 2 is 12. Okay, on the right-hand side, I have 2 times 3 plus 7 times 0. 2 times 3 is 6, plus 0, hopefully you know, is 0. Well, plus 0 is going to still be 6. Okay, what's the difference? The difference is minus 6. Okay, so that's going to be 6 electrons. And they're going to be added to the more positive side, the left-hand side. So that's going to be 6 electrons on my left. And I'm going to try and get rid of that circle. Okay, so that's my balanced half equation. All right, let's try that again. So with H2O2, we're going to balance everything, not hydrogen, oxygen. That's done for us. So let's move on to oxygen. That's done for us. So let's move on to hydrogen. And that is going to be 2H plus. Now we've got 0 charge on the left. That's because 1 times 0 is 0. Okay, and then 1 times 0 plus 2 times 1 is going to give us 2 plus on the right. So it's 2 extra positives on the right. That means we need 2 negatives to make that 0, to make them balance. And that's done. Let's move on. Permanganate and Mn2 plus. Again, balance the manganese, which is an oxygen or hydrogen. Done. Then we're going to balance oxygen, 4H2O. Then we're going to balance hydrogen. We're going to have 2 times 4, 2 times 4. So we're going to balance that out with 8H plus. Okay, and now we're going to count our charges. Again, I'm going to count this up in green. Minus 1 plus 8 is going to get plus 7. On this side, I have plus 2 plus 4 times 0. 4 times 0 is 0. Plus 2 means plus 2. The difference is minus 5. Okay, so that means I'm going to have 5 electrons on the left to balance the charge. Okay, the next one, sulfite to sulfate. Okay, sulfur is already balanced. Sulfur is already balanced. Okay, oxygen isn't. We need to add 1 oxygen to the left, sorry, in the form of water. To the right, we're going to add 2 hydrogens to balance those 2 hydrogens we just added. Okay, there's 2 negatives on the left, and there is 0 on the right, so we're going to add 2 negatives to balance that charge. And we're done. All right, and just a couple of easy ones. Magnesium, no oxygen, no hydrogen. All we're going to do is balance the charge. 2 electrons on the more positive side makes them equal. Palladium over here, opposite scenario, going from 2 plus down to 0. So we want 2 electrons on the left to balance that charge. And that's our balancing half equations. All right, now we're going to combine these equations. First thing is to work out a way to make them equal. So this is going to be a common factor thing. So we're going to look at, let's look at the first two. Zoom in. All right, so the first two here, our common factor between 6 and 2. The common factor is 2. So what do we need? That's all of this. So we don't need to multiply this by anything. It's completely in this common factor. What we need to do is multiply these 2 electrons by 3 to get up to 6. Okay, so I'm going to multiply this by 3. Then I'm going to add them together to get my overall equation. Okay, now you can write an extra multiplied equation if you really want to, but it really isn't worth a lot of time and effort to do that. Okay, so we're going to put Cr2O7 to minus plus 14H plus. And for now, I'll keep my electrons in, 6 electrons. Okay, I'm then also going to include the 3 times H2O2. So 3H2O2. Then on my right, I'm going to have all of this plus 3 times this. So I'm going to have my chromium, chromium 3 plus. I'm going to have 7 H2Os. I'm going to have 3 times O2. And I'm going to have 3 times 2H plus. Okay, now I've got to go through and cancel out anything that's on both sides. So by the magic of deletion, I'm going to delete it. But in your exam, you're going to have to cross it and add it in yourself. So I've got 8H plus. I cancelled out the 6. And everything else is just fine. Okay, and so that's my balanced whole equation. Now, you'll see my set of steps. Multiply each equation as needed. Doesn't always have to happen. Add the equations, cancel out what's on both sides, and then finally, you're going to clean up. Now, I forgot to cancel out my 6 electrons, but there we go. They're gone now. Okay, so no equation at the end should have electrons in it. That's for half equations only. All right, so let's combine these two, permanganate and sulfite. All right, so there's no common factors between 5 and 2, so we're just going to cross multiply. Okay, so I'm going to have 2 times this equation and 5 times this equation. All right, to get my answer then, I'm going to want 2MnO4 minus plus 16H plus. Now, I'm not going to put electrons in anymore. I know I've worked this out correctly. 5 times 2 is 10, and 2 times 5 is 10. So that's going to work out fine. All right, and then I'm going to add from the second equation, I'm going to add sulfite, 5 of them, and 5 waters. So 5SO3 2 minus plus 5H2O. And then I'm going to add in the products, which is going to be double the Mn2 plus and double the waters, so 8H2O. I'm going to have double the SO4 2 minus, 5 times, sorry. And I'm going to have 5 times the H plus, which is 10. And the electrons, like I said, we already know they're going to cancel. Now I need to go through and cancel out anything on both sides. So I'm going to actually cross these out so you can see it. Okay, and that's going to now become 6H plus. I'm also going to cross out my waters, 5 and 5, and this is going to become 3H2O. Okay, so I'll rewrite that. 2MnO4 minus plus 6H plus 5SO3 2 minus goes to 2Mn2 plus 3H2O plus 5SO4 2 minus. Okay, now if you're not convinced that this balancing has worked, you can actually manually check your addition. So 2Mn, 2Mn. 2 times 4 is 8, plus 5 times 3. That's 15 plus 8 is 23. Okay, so let's move on. We've got 3 times 1 is 3, plus 5 times 4 is 23. Cool, oxygen's balanced. H's, 6 H's, and 3 times 2 is 6 H's. All right, and sulfurs is 5 sulfurs, and there's 5 sulfurs. So all those elements add up. There's just one last bit, the charge. 2 times minus 1 is negative 2, plus 6 makes positive 4, minus 2 makes positive 2. On this side, 2 times 2 is 4, plus negative 10 gives you minus 6. So we had over here, sorry, we had negative 2 plus 6 minus 10. It's a total of minus 6. And this one is plus 4 minus 10, which is also minus 6. Okay, got that right. Do need to be careful to make sure you multiply through the number out in front times the charge when you're doing that addition. All right, one more, nice and easy. Combine these two. All right, so this one, the electrons are already equal, so I'm not going to be adding anything no multiplication. And then I'm going to go mg2 plus pd. And done. Nothing fancy. There's no extra balancing, no extra cancelling, etc. Now, if you're doing observations, a typical thing a lot of people will do will add observations, but you can see that sort of thing in a different video. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you've learned something.